All right, all right, all right. How's everybody doing this evening? This Monday, or no, it's not Monday no more. What's wrong with you, 12? This Tuesday evening. My name is 12 Gauge. This is my channel, 12 Gauge Investigative, and I hope everybody's doing well. I even wore my special shirt for you guys tonight. Check it out. What do y'all think about that? I wore my special reading shirt just for y'all. Hope y'all hope y'all like that. You know, I'm still waiting for some people to come in here. Let me say hello to the people that are here. Rondi Potter, Leslie and Billy, Bulletin Bling. Nice to see you guys. And hopefully some more people will show up. You know, I bought this book on Kindle today, and I thought, what the hell? Why haven't I read this book yet? Of all the books I've been reading, why haven't I read this one? I know how people feel about the other Idaho um, book, so I kind of decided, nah, I'm not going to read that one. So I thought I'd read this one. So let's go ahead and see how things are going with you guys. Y'all doing all right? I'm on call this week, so if the phone rings unexpectedly, that's what's going on. I got to answer it and take care of it. So just so you guys know. And Mickey Mouse is in the house. Mickey Mouse is in the house. I just came back from my parents' house and they were so nice to get me a Stanley tumbler. And I was like, wow, I've always wanted one of these, but I've just never had um, a Stanley tumbler. Do y'all have those? Have y'all gotten one of those already? Y'all let me know what's going on. Hey Leslie, I wanted to tell you thank you for gifting those memberships earlier in the other live or the other premiere. That was very nice of you. And for those of you that are new members, I hope that you enjoy the content in the members only tab on the channel. You know, it is gray. Let me show you. As you can see, that tells you the size of my hand. As you can see with the tumbler, this is a 40 ouncer, so you can see the size of my hand. So I hope you guys are doing okay. If you're not, I'll send some good vibes your way because I know that people have situations in their lives on a, life is not a vacuum. We don't live, in a fairy tale world where there's not times where we have situations go on in our lives. You know, we all have those moments where we need a little bit of grace and a little bit of love from each other. So I hope that you guys are doing well. And if you're not, I send good vibes your way and good and prayers and blessings. Okay. So if you're not a religious person, I understand that, but that doesn't mean that I can't pray for you. Well, let me go ahead and begin while we wait on other people to get here. Mods, y'all know what to do. I don't see anybody really being out of hand lately, so you are very welcoming to these individuals, so that's an awesome thing. So let's begin. It says prologue. Moscow, Idaho is a nook in the northern forest, a college town for most of the year, and a working class whistle stop for the rest of it. When the University of Idaho is in session, there are 25,000 people in Moscow, but in the off season, that number is less than half. You usually don't end up in this remote hamlet, crouched beneath the Palouse Mountains, unless you're trying to end up here. It's just not somewhere you land by accident, and that's the beauty of it. In summer, you can smell the pine burning off the nearby forest. From sunlight, its sharp perfume drifting into the valley. In winter, the downtown is strung with Christmas lights, and there are footsteps in the snow from store to store. When the weather is bad enough, and it often is, an occasional set of cross country ski tracks can be seen running down the center of Main Street on nights when automobiles don't dare risk the journey. Some of the street lamps are still ornate like in old fashioned holiday movies. That is pretty awesome. There's hardly any crime in this little village. There are drug related crimes like everywhere else, but not terribly newsworthy ones. Crimes of petty theft, shoplifting, and of course, domestic assaults, which are violent but statistically stem from addiction and poverty. America's crimes of the broken heart and soul. In mid November 2022, just weeks before Moscow would be hunkered down for one of its notorious North Idaho winters, the 37 member Moscow Police Department had its first murder case in 7 years, a quadruple homicide. Four University of Idaho students had been stabbed to death overnight in an off campus house, squatting against a hillside cluster of equally collegiate multi tenant units. According to the Moscow police, it was around 4 a.m. when an unknown subject, or unsub in police terminology, entered this co ed residence under the cloak of darkness, just yards from the college campus, and then, with a hunting style fixed blade knife, made short work of his victims, stabbing them to death. The savagery was breathtaking, the motivation unimaginable. The coroner had initially stated that all four victims at 1122 King Road were likely to have been asleep. Some had defensive wounds. If asleep, they would have awakened and struggled as if they were being attacked, and each was stabbed multiple times in various areas of their bodies, including fatally in the upper torso. There was a lot of blood, the Latah County coroner, Kathy Mabbitt, told the regional news station. It was a very sad scene. She would downplay the horror in those bedrooms and would later privately discuss the crimes in far more graphic detail with family members of the victims. The killer had torn the victim's flesh with a massive knife, she said, the way a deer hunter might tear into his prey when dressing it out. Also, later, investigators would reveal that the victims likely hadn't been asleep after all. One of the victims had also reportedly suffered what's known as overkill, when a murderer doesn't stop at death but just keeps stabbing. There were five housemates and one visiting boyfriend in the residence that night. Two of the six were unharmed. The rest were attacked so viciously that blood leaked out of the house and seeped through the floorboards, dripping along the concrete foundation beneath one of the bedrooms. Murdered that night were Kaylee Gonsalves, Madison Mogan, both 21, their housemate Xana Kernodle, 20, and her boyfriend Ethan Chapin, also 20. All four had ties to Greek life, the fraternity and sorority social class system, and all four would soon become international obsessions. It was the brutality of the murders that drew public attention, and then, with no arrests made in the initial weeks, citizen sleuths took the investigation into their own hands. They stalked the victims' social media profiles, looking for clues, and started YouTube channels and TikTok profiles dedicated solely to the case. And because many had monetized their channels, a frenzy of knockoff channels soon began, with millions of international followers possessing no investigative expertise now speculating on the crimes. The victims were out of central casting: Kaylee and Maddie, movie star blondes; Ethan, a young John F. Kennedy Jr. or Robert Pattinson look-alike, tall and sturdy jawed, and always alongside his girlfriend Xana, who fit perfectly under his arm in the photos, her smile seeming to buoy him. They all looked good on camera, and the mainstream media took notice. The town of Moscow seemed to have lost its innocence overnight, and many in this normally trusting community, where doors were often left unlocked, almost immediately ordered security cameras for the exteriors of their homes. Some students even began carrying concealed handguns on their walk through campus. In this deeply red state, no permits were required. Let me say hello to people in the chat. I noticed some people are coming in. Mickey, how are you doing? Thank you for being here. Um, Warning label Nina, Walt Harris, how are you doing, buddy? Thank you for being here. Thank you so much for being here. This is the prologue. I haven't even started in chapter 1 yet. This is kind of like the build up to the book. Fox and News Nation were the first to descend upon Moscow to cover the official investigation, and soon every major network in America would arrive. The paparazzi also showed up in droves, taking photographs of the murder house as it became known at 1122 King Road. One of the victim's fathers, Steve Gonsalves, spoke to a Fox reporter in front of the Moscow police station on a bitter cold night when the investigation was just days old, exhaling in frustration when he revealed that he'd been asked by investigators not to disclose that the coroner had told him how his daughter had been brutalized. Requests for silence are standard early in homicide cases, but Gonsalves, in a cat-branded sweatshirt and ball cap, his ice cold in the middle but beet red at the rim from crying, wasn't having it. I paid for that funeral, he said, and nobody was going to tell him what he could or could not speak on to the press about, not while the cops were still looking, seemingly unsuccessfully, for his daughter's killer. You ain't taking that from me. His daughter had come back to him in a box, he'd added bluntly, then stumbled over his words. The loss, compounded by the pressure of not knowing who'd done this to his little girl, or why, was buckling him. Gonsalves' wife, Christy, nudged him on camera. Calm down, she said quietly. Every hotel in this little town was soon booked, all the parking spots taken, and the international spotlight cast hotly onto Moscow Chief of Police, James Fry, who began holding daily news conferences to appease the public hunger for information. At the first of them, Chief Fry explained that the crime scene was the worst he'd ever seen. Investigators had found no murder weapon, and they currently had no leads, none they were speaking of anyways. Eventually, Fry added emotionally, "We do not have a suspect at this time, and that individual is still out there." He was teary-eyed, and neither the cameras nor the world could look away. Part 1. Are y'all excited for this? Are y'all ready for this? Even though y'all know the way it goes, are y'all ready for this? Let's get it going. Let me hear. We are ready, 12. We are ready. Part 1. Chapter 1. On November 12, 2022, Kaylee Gonsalves and Maddie Mogan, college roommates and best friends since middle school, headed out for a night of fun at the Corner Club bar downtown Moscow, Idaho. It was an overcast Saturday night following an afternoon when the national headline had been dominated by two large planes that had collided in midair and then burst into flames, cartwheeling to the ground and shutting down a Dallas freeway. Dang, I had totally forgot about that. Not that most college kids in this town paid much attention to the daily news elsewhere in the country. Moscow was a hideaway for many of the world's stresses, which made it a special place. The mountains were wrapped around the community, and it felt cozy inside that blanket of simple living. The temperature outside in Moscow that night was 32 degrees, the exact freezing point, but Idaho kids became accustomed to that harsh weather. Kaylee wore only a light sweatshirt and jeans with trendy holes across the knees, white sneakers on her feet. Maddie wore jeans frayed at the bottoms like Kaylee's and a pink form-fitting midriff t-shirt beneath a black jacket big enough to belong to somebody's father, the arms overly floppy, the hem hanging to her thighs. Inside the concrete bunker-style establishment, sports memorabilia and neon beer signs hung on the walls, and several large televisions above the bar top cast their light across Kaylee and Maddie while they drank from a long-necked bottles of beer. On weekends, the bar was elbow to elbow with 20-something college boys, many of them fraternity brothers who wore their ball cap backward and leaning closely to their peers and to the sorority girls like Kaylee and Maddie. The Corner Club was a hub for Greek social life off campus, and Kaylee and Maddie were regulars there. Mingling among the cinder block building's raised drinking tables, their feet shuffling through spilled beer on the floor, their friends arriving all evening long to the metal door with steel mesh inside a silk sliver of a window. The night of the 12th was no different. A basketball game on ESPN, but nobody really watching. The bar surveillance camera showing Kaylee and Maddie appearing to get slowly and happily buzzed. Thanksgiving break was only a week away, and there was excitement in the air for a much needed respite from academics. In fact, Kaylee was finishing with school entirely. She was graduating at the end of the semester, and she'd already accepted a job in marketing that was scheduled to start in February way down in Austin. Kaylee's plan was to get her degree, head to Europe for a month, and then come back to real life. It would be the first time she and Maddie had lived in different towns since they were children. Toward the end of the night, the girls stopped to chat with Kaylee's on again, off again boyfriend, Jack DeCurr, whom she'd recently broken up with, by all accounts, amicably. Jack was tall, with thick auburn hair and stubble along his jaw. He still looked at Kaylee as they'd one day get married. Kaylee and Jack also continued to share their dog, Murphy, a golden doodle turning a year old in December. And though its human mom and dad were recently separated, the former couple still had a connection. Family and friends knew it, Jack and Kaylee knew it, and spoke about it to their peers, and it was obvious in the Corner Club. Jack and Kaylee's body language was as friendly as ever. For a while that night, Maddie separated from Kaylee and had a long conversation with one of the club bartenders, Adam Lauda, a chiseled, handsome young man. Lauda was also in a fraternity and was a close friend of Jack DeCurr's. Maddie and Lauda might have made a good-looking couple, but Maddie already had a boyfriend and was known to be deeply committed to him and very much in love. By the time Kaylee and Maddie left the bar, it was well after 1 a.m. They each appeared slightly drunk on surveillance cameras and were accompanied by an acquaintance named Jack Showalter, who was reportedly tagging along to make sure the two girls got home safely. Together, the trio walked 2 blocks down Main Street, their breath visible in the cold air, and the sidewalk lit by storefronts and passing traffic. A camera overhead caught Showalter in black jeans, a black jacket over a light-colored hooded sweatshirt, and a black baseball cap turned backwards. Keely and Maddie chatted, while Showalter appeared reserved. The girls acted oblivious to his presence, the way girls who are best friends will sometimes do to boys outside of their bond. Maddie playfully swung one of the oversized arms of her jacket, and Kaylee, sounding equally playful, but also slightly annoyed, asked her, "Maddie, what did you say to Adam?" Maddie responded, "Like I told Adam everything." But they didn't get into what everything was, not in front of Showalter right then. Just after 1:30 a.m., the three of them stopped at the Grub Truck, a popular outdoor canteen for late-night snacking on mac and cheese varieties. The 5 cheese mac, Death by Garlic mac, mac of fire, or for the late-night sweet tooth, the berry Nutella cheesecake burrito. Parked along Main Street, the Grub Truck that often drew a sizable after-hours crowd on the weekends. The night of the 12th and into the morning of the 13th, which it now was, the eatery was swarmed by college students returning from the bars. Like Kaylee and Maddie, most appeared slightly drunk while they stood around on the sidewalk chatting as they waited for their food. What do y'all think so far? Pretty good? Pretty good? Let me see. All right. I see y'all. All right. Where'd everybody go? Okay. Let's see. Kaylee asked for the carbonara, her exuberance seemingly alcohol induced. She told Maddie they could split the food. Like friends on a playground splitting sandwiches, Gonsalves with more money family, and confidence of knowing where your next meal might come from. And Mogan would maybe less. Maddie's family life had been repaired, but she'd been a product of divorce, and her father had brushes with the law early in her life. Kaylee and Maddie waited approximately 10 minutes to receive their food. Maddie was shivering, finally feeling cold. It seemed like her long-armed jacket still dangling open around her cropped shirt. Showalter, already dressed more warmly than the two girls, turned his ball cap forward and pulled the hood over his head. In the meantime, Kaylee quietly ordered a ride share, and the two girls continued to mostly ignore Showalter, who by now was talking to a male peer beside him. Suddenly, Maddie turned in the direction of Showalter and his acquaintance, pointing at them mischievously. Fuck you, she said, but it was almost as if to nobody, the kind of random outburst alcohol can bring about. She didn't appear truly angry. In fact, there was still a smile on her face. Showalter continued his conversation with his peer, while Kaylee and Maddie began to whisper together. Kaylee nodded her head sideways in a gesture that usually means, let's get out of here soon. And that's what they did. When the food came, Showalter happened to be distracted by his conversation. Kaylee and Maddie jumped into their ride share, leaving Showalter behind without so much as a goodbye. It was the last time anybody at the grub truck would see the two girls alive. Wow. People are running out of here. What's up? Chapter 2. Ethan Chapin was tall, dimpled, and athletic, raised by an Enact family just north of Seattle. His height had been intimidating, but friends described him as a gentle giant, always with a smile on his face, always with a positive attitude, and big hearted. Ethan was also the firstborn of triplets, with a younger brother who eventually surpassed him in height, and a sister whose eyes sparkled with life. Their childhood in a beautiful northern Washington had been picture book. The parents with good jobs and a vacation home, the children photographing like Eddie Bauer models in the clean mountain air, smiles as wide and honest as money can buy. The family was outdoorsy and active in their community, and all three siblings had enrolled in the University of Idaho, just a few hundred miles from where they'd grown up. Ethan was studying in recreation, sport, and tourism management program, which fit well with his active lifestyle and happy-go-lucky nature. When he met Xana Kernodle his freshman year, she appeared to share his outlook on life. She made friends as easily as he did. She even made a habit of befriending the moms of her friends and had their numbers in her phone. And there was a welcoming pep in her. Ethan and Xana became chummy, then began dating soon after. A marketing major, Xana seemed to know everybody on Greek Row, the area where most of the students in fraternities and sororities resided. And like Ethan, she was athletic, her frame and spirit honed by early years as a gymnast. She had been raised in the woodsy Post Falls, a working class suburb of Coeur d'Alene, 120 miles south of the Canadian border. It was a beautiful place to grow up, but Xana's mother struggled with drug addiction and was periodically incarcerated. Due to one of those drug-related criminal charges, Xana's mom wore a court-mandated ankle monitor until the day Xana was born. She was arrested on additional drug charges when Xana was 5 months old, and there were many more arrests in her future, Xana leaning on her to embrace the good days when they came. In and out of the system, her mother was an infrequent presence during Xana's formative years, and Xana eventually lived full-time with her father, who worked in the building trades. She was close to him, but when she arrived in Moscow for her freshman year of U of I and met Ethan, with his easy and joyful manner, it must have felt like finally coming home. On the night of November 12th, Ethan took his sister Maisie to her Kappa Alpha Theta sorority formal, an early evening event. Their brother Hunter joined them as Maisie's roommate date. The triplets were together, dressed in evening wear. Both of the boys, with their shirts unbuttoned to the collarbone, their blazers fitted to their broad shoulders, Maisie and her roommate wore silky strap dresses that clung to their torsos, bared their shoulders, and reflected the overhead lighting when they posed for photographs, smiling and laughing. Ethan's hair had grown floppy and thick, but was styled cleanly across his brow, and he wore a light mustache, a popular choice on campus. He looked good as his sister's co-pilot. Everyone knew he'd do anything for his siblings, and his day-to-day behavior showed that. Family and Xana were everything to Ethan. According to friends, he met up with his girlfriend right after Maisie's formal, and by approximately 9 p.m., he and Dana were at the Sigma Chi house, where Ethan lived with his fraternity brothers, only a quarter mile downhill from the King Road residence. At Sigma Chi, a small party had begun to grow into a larger one, and Ethan and Dana indulged along with their peers. Hanging in a prominent position on the wall were the official Sigma Chi standards. A respectable fraternity brother was a man of good character, good morals, a congenial disposition, and a deep sense of personal responsibility. Ethan embodied those qualities, and Sigma Chi was where he belonged, partying with his chosen brothers, his girlfriend beside him, and a beer in his hand. He and Dana were not yet of legal drinking age, but behind the walls of Sigma Chi, nobody of authority knew the difference. Later in the night, Ethan and Dana made their way uphill to 1122 King Road, passing the large grassy bandfield that gathered moisture into frigid temperatures and usually soaked through the toes of anything other than solid leather shoes. The sky was so overcast that night that it hid the moon, but the street lights along King Road were bright enough to see as they approached the house Dana shared with her roommates. Perched on a sloping plot that offered privacy amid the gaggle of multi-tenant housing units surrounding it, the structure of 1122 was built irregularly, shaped like three tiers of a Jenga stack. The front door, although locked by a number-coded safety pad, was warm and welcoming to many visitors the girls often had. A cheery autumn wreath promised hospitality to friends coming up the long driveway, with its oversized parking pad to comfortably fit half a dozen cars regularly parked there, as well as the extras that arrived when the girls threw parties. Along the back, abutting the hillside to the east of the house, where the sun would rise, was a walk-up second-story deck with a sliding glass door that entered into the common area. This was the most frequently traveled pathway into the house on party nights, or during those early school days when the weather was still warm enough to barbecue or drink beer on the concrete deck. The slider door was frequently unlocked, since the front door keypad was a nuisance. The keypad wasn't that safe anyways. Plenty of the housemates' friends knew the code, only 3 months into the school year. Ethan and Xana, not old enough for the off-campus bars, were sometimes home earlier than Xana's housemates, and from Xana's bedroom they could often hear people coming and going through both the slider and the front door. That's interesting to know. So, could she have been the one that said, "There's someone here"? Isn't that what we heard? Could it have been Xana that said, "There's someone here" because she heard the slider open? I didn't know that she could hear the slider from her room. That's cool to know. But the house was quiet that night as Xana brought Ethan home. None of the neighbors were throwing parties, and the narrow road out front was mostly deserted of pedestrians beneath the glowing streetlights. Ethan and Xana walked up to the house, making that journey together for the final time. Chapter 3. Bethany Funk's first door bedroom at 1122 King Road had a window that faced the property's communal parking lot. Anyone occupying that room over the years would have learned to sleep through the noise of vehicles pulling up, headlights sweeping across the glass. Sometimes it was silent outside the house, the lengthening nights of early autumn quieter than the more the leaves changed colors. But on weekends, there was traffic out front and friends coming in and out of the home. The neighboring multi-tenant units all had visitors too, especially the big apartment complex looking down on the house. People in cars came and went all night long sometimes. Bethany's body and mind acclimated to sounds eventually, no different than a low droning wind through the trees. Bethany's immaculate childhood home in Reno had been considerably more peaceful, with its beautifully landscaped grounds, including a massive meditation pond, geothermally fed water piping into the lawn, and a private basketball and sporting court that was fully fenced and tucked away from the street. Bethany's father was a successful dentist, her mother a school aide, and the family could afford life's finer things. It was a charmed upbringing, by all appearances, but life in Moscow also had its charms. Bethany was a sorority sister in Pi Beta Phi, like her housemate Xana and Maddie, and with that came a fast-paced social life for the 19-year-old, whose previous school year had been her first living away from home. She was blonde like all the girls in the house except Xana, and her fit silhouette and photogenic features drew frequent compliments on her social media accounts. The youngest of the housemate, she not only fit in, but also fit the part in the college sweatshirt she often wore. Bethany looked like an Idaho girl, comfy in the new climate she left home for. The Funk family had deep roots in Nevada, but here in Idaho, Bethany was free to explore a life built on her own terms, forming new roots in the Greek system and new friendships in the popular circles surrounding her roommates. After spending the evening of November 12th off campus, Bethany had reportedly returned home at approximately 1 a.m. The small cluster of hardwood trees reflected in the sliding door behind the house had not yet dropped their leaves. They were dark and shadowy and hard to see through up the slope. Even on clear nights when the moon shone brightly overhead, the 50-foot grove of trees and underbrush rising between the King Road house and an upper-level accessory parking bluff made for limited visibility past the rim of the girl's backyard. The parking bluff itself, technically portioned to the 49-unit brick-built Queen apartments, could sometimes be used for overflow visitors to 1122, although that happened infrequently. In cold weather, it was common for vehicles to be left idling on the bluff while warming up, and in all seasons, it was regularly used by food delivery drivers and personal visitors to the three-story Queen complex. There's another interesting fact. You know how many times we had said, did he park? And somebody had said, did he leave his lights on? I'm not going to be about speculation, but I'm going to ask you this question. Could he have left his car idling while he committed the crimes? It just said right there, many people left it idling. Nobody would have been none the wiser. Turn the lights off, leave the car idling, come back, jump in, and take off. What do y'all think? Interesting, I thought. By winter, after the leaves had dropped, tenants on the King Road could see right through the upper concrete pad. But for remaining months of the year, the nighttime became an oil-black veil between the two properties. Anything really could happen up there in the dark around the apartment complex or in the small grove of trees, even violence or the threat of a lurking, and nobody downhill would know. Not that many people in Moscow ever thought of such a thing. Unlike in Reno, violent crimes in the northern areas of Idaho were so infrequent as to appear non-existent. Even an unlocked fishbowl of a house in Moscow, its windows often with curtains undrawn, felt like one of the safest places on earth to come home to. Bethany had retired to her first floor bedroom shortly after returning to the King Road on the 13th. Ethan and Dana were on the second floor. Bethany shut the door to her room and soon climbed into bed. Investigative reports indicate that she slept through Kaylee and Maddie coming home from the grub truck. And even with the window of her room facing the street, she slept through the headlight that would usually ascend past the house just after the bar closing time, around 2:15 a.m., when residents of the Queen Apartments complex returned home. Crucially, Bethany slept through another set of headlights, low against the ground, from a sedan that slowly entered the neighborhood, then climbed a hill past 1122 King Road. The face of its driver was concealed in the darkness of the sedan's interior, but the body of the vehicle, a white Hyundai Elantra, was caught on neighborhood security cameras. The driver of the vehicle made one pass by the residence at approximately 3:30 a.m., heading toward the Queen Apartments, where the vehicle circled and returned, creeping downhill past 1122 King Road now, its low beams infracting off the pavement. Between 3:30 and 4, the vehicle made 3 passes by the King Road resident, and Bethany reportedly slept through them all. And through Xana's 4 a.m. DoorDash delivery from Jack in the Box, the only restaurant open that late, the DoorDash driver had arrived from 10 miles away in Pullman, Washington, just across the Idaho state line. A long drive to make for a fast food delivery, but Pullman and Moscow often felt like the same town. Both with universities, both with students who frequently indulged her late night munchies. Bethany hadn't awakened when Kaylee and Maddie talked upstairs 90 minutes earlier, desperately calling Jack DeCur on their cell phones. Even if they'd recently broken up, Jack was Kaylee's love. She had been drinking, and the nights could be long without Jack to hold on to. Kaylee had made 7 calls to Jack over the 18-minute period, but he'd unanswered none of them. Then Maddie had tried calling Jack too, 3 times without reaching him. All their calls went to Jack's voicemail. Bethany slept, and when the noises changed, they did not penetrate her slumber. The slash of a knife, the sound of a whimper, a body hitting the floor. From a distance, it all might have been no louder than a door being slammed, a sound Bethany must have heard 100 times by now, the echo of it just a stammer in her dreams. Let me stop to see what you are talking about. That gave me chills. Yes, she was turned in to hearing the doors open. Sliding glass doors, shadows, never thought of that. Wouldn't he have been worried about that leaving the car on? Well, if it was normal for the car to be idling, for many cars to be idling, I don't think people would have thought otherwise, if it's a normal thing, you know. But it could have been. I mean, you know, if it's a normal occurrence. I think the DoorDash driver went to the front. I did never hear of him going to the back. I think that's just something that other people have created as a narrative. I'm not certain though. I'm pretty sure though he went to the front. I don't see him climbing that embankment off the side of the house to go deliver um some food. This is pretty good. What do y'all think? I'm mesmerized right now. I'm acting like this is the first time I've heard of this crime. Chapter 4. Dylan Mortensen, a tall blonde sophomore and originally a Boise girl, lived on the second floor at 1122 King Road, on the opposite side of the house from where Xana and sometimes Ethan slept. A large common area separated the two sides of the residence, but it wasn't much of a buffer for sound. Dylan's bedroom shared a wall with the living room and was close to the partied-in kitchen with a sliding glass door leading out to the deck. Dylan had gone to Boise High downstate, a city school with white columns, award-winning teachers, and a festering drug problem. Like many high school, opioids mostly. and Adderall and weed. She had been raised primarily by her mother and stepfather, but her father, Brent, remained a large presence in her life, not just psychologically, but physically too. He was 240 pounds of muscle, a fact he'd recently alluded to in a text. Just a friendly reminder of who is going to show up at the boy's door who messes with one of my daughters, she told Dylan. The text was accompanied by a photo of him, built like a brick oven, his forearms as big as sledgehammers, and a look in his eyes like a man who'd already seen combat in his personal life and would welcome it again to save his family. In another message, he told her, "If you ever need anything, you let me know. A ride home, clothes, to be at an event, get you out of trouble, food, or just a hug. I will drop whatever I'm doing to help you." He'd also recently sent Dylan a photo of herself as a child, her hair in pink bows, his, his own face, much younger, beside her, his baseball cap turned backward while he leaned into the camera. "We used to travel a lot," he'd say. "We're going to start doing that again. I love you, girls, more than anyone or anything. Daddy's back, baby." Dylan posted screenshots of Brent's messages to her social media. She could have stayed for college in Boise near her father. Boise State was the university where most Boise High students ended up. The tuition was affordable, the grade point average for admissions doable, and for many students, going to college in the comfort of their own backyards was preferable. But not for Dylan. The U of I was where downstate students went to get away, but also to find themselves. And in Moscow, she seemingly slid easily into a version of herself that her father might admire, leaving home instead of staying put, finding comfort in the family surrounding her on campus and also inside 1122 King Road, where her corner bedroom on the second floor was tastefully decorated. On the 13th, Dylan told investigators afterward she had been sleeping but was awoken just before 2 a.m. by her housemates and Ethan, who'd returned to the residence but had not gone straight to bed. Based on investigative reports, she had apparently dozed, fell back into a deep sleep, and was again awoken by a commotion in the house, this time shortly after 4 a.m. I want to say this right quick because I know people are going to hear this and they're going to critique it to death with the document that it came out. And they're going to say, no, that said this, that said that. At this time when this book was written, there wasn't much information out there. And I'm pretty sure this author wasn't prevalent to the information that we've been prevalent to lately. So go lightly on this author because, to be honest, nobody knew the information we know now. We probably knew as much as this author did at this point. So go lightly on him and don't fact check his writing. It sounds pretty accurate, but there's just a little discrepancies that we found out, right? She had apparently dozed, fell back into a deep sleep, and was again woken by a commotion in the house, this time shortly after 4 a.m. Dylan could hear what sounded like Kaylee playing with her dog. The golden doodle she shared with Jack DeCure upstairs on the third floor just above her. She could hear Murphy barking and could hear movement across the floor. The sounds were too loud to try to sleep through. From her bedroom, Dylan yelled out to her housemates, asking them to calm down. She was trying to sleep. She shouted up to them, but they didn't answer. She thought she heard Kaylee say, "There's someone here." Or maybe it was Xana saying the words. Dylan wasn't sure. Sometimes voices were heard through the vents, the walls, the flooring. Their direction of origin could be obfuscated in an old house, which is true. Dylan, but nobody thinks about that stuff. They just instantly want to attack Dylan. Dylan got up from her bed. She opened her bedroom door and looked toward a nearby stairwell that led to the third floor, where she saw nothing. In the dark, there were only shadows. Around the hall from her to the left was the shared kitchen, and down a hallway to the right was Xana's bedroom, where Ethan had been staying over a lot. Nothing looked out of the ordinary in that direction, either. She closed her bedroom door and started to return to bed. But then she heard more commotion. Somebody in Xana's bedroom was crying, but she wasn't sure who. All she knew was that she heard what sounded like tears. She again opened her bedroom door and peeked out. While she saw nothing remarkable, she heard a male voice say what she thought was, "It's okay. I'm going to help you." It sounded like it came from Xana's room. Maybe Xana had been crying and Ethan was going to help with whatever was wrong, Dylan thought. She was exhausted from all the noise keeping her awake, but soon she heard more crying, and for a third time she opened her bedroom door. This time she saw a man dressed in all black clothing, with a black mask covering his mouth and his nose. He was walking toward Dylan in the dark, an athletic looking person but not muscular, 5'10" or taller, and with bushy eyebrows. Had he been partying with her roommates? Was he one of the many new friends they'd made during the first month of school? She didn't know. Dylan stood in her bedroom door watching him pass. He was not rushed, but not casual either. Just a man leaving one place for somewhere else. The man brushed lightly past Dylan's doorway without acknowledging her. He exited through the sliding glass door that led up to the second floor patio, where warm weather parties would occur and where the wooded slope behind their house led to an often trafficked parking platform on higher ground. A man in a mask who'd left the house but not run from it. For the past 2 years, just about everybody had been wearing a mask to prevent infection from the vid. In their classrooms, at the store, some people had even gone on dates wearing paper masks that muffled their voices and intentions. Things upstairs were quiet now, Murphy no longer barking, and from down the hall, Dylan no longer heard anyone crying. By 4:20, Dylan had locked herself in her bedroom for the remainder of the night. She did not come out until just before noon, when the sun was already high and the bodies of her housemates lay scattered on the second and third floors, which we know that has not happened because she went down to Bethany's room. Enough blood around them to paint the walls. Whoa. Whoa. Chapter 5. Just before 3 a.m. on the 13th, two Moscow police officers patrolling Banfield and the nearby Greek Road for alcohol offenses spotted four male students in the elongated, grassy expanse that stretched from the Sigma Chi fraternity house to the small apartment complexes of Taylor Avenue, a winding two-lane thoroughfare running beneath the King Road neighborhood. At a certain angle from the field, the roofline of the King Road residence was visible above Taylor Avenue. Nearby a street lamp provided partial lighting of the Banfield perimeter, but the dark interior of the field was a no man's land at night. The cops got out of their vehicles and attempted to make contact with the young men, all of them wearing athletic shoes and jeans, none wearing coats to shield them from the frigid temperatures as they hurried on foot across the field. The police approached from a distance, calling out. The first young male, carrying two unopened beers, complied with a stop request. The police wanted to confirm that he was of legal drinking age. As we know, this is Saeed, correct? It became clear that he was not traveling with the other three, who had now taken off across the field and returned only when one of the officers went after them. The first young man, wearing a ball cap and a USA jersey, appeared sober and had broken no laws, so he would just let go after his age was verified. As seen in the body cam footage, the other three young men nervously returned. They lined up as if by instinct when facing authority figures. One crossed his arm from the cold, one jammed his fist into his pants pockets, and a third cocked his hip, then removed his ball cap. "You gotta take off on me?" the officer asked them. One of the young men responded, "I thought it was just like a fake person, honestly." "How many fake people are out here?" that you've experienced?" the officer asked. The audio unexpectedly went silent for a while, and the three young men appeared dreamlike in the body cam footage. The movements of their torsos like shadows, swaying dark, their legs lit by the officer's flashlight beams. Minutes into the silence, the audio returned. An officer was heard asking the young men how much they'd had to drink. "Two beers," one said after the pressure from the officers. They all admitted to having consumed 6 to 8 beers apiece. "No shots?" the officer asked. "No shots," one of them responded. "What kind of beers?" "Busch Light," two of them said. All of them were visibly intoxicated. The officer instructed all three to follow him to his vehicle, where they lined up in the street, lit by patrol cars' headlights. All three were freshmen at the University of Idaho, and none were of legal drinking age. The officer began to write them citations. "You guys all live in the same frat?" he asked. "Yeah," one said reluctantly. "Which is?" "Alpha Kappa Lambda." 6 years earlier, the Washington State University chapter of the fraternity, 15 minutes away across the state border, had been shut down after law enforcement found evidence of widespread hazing and drug distribution. "Seemed to be a pretty slow weekend," the officer said, making small talk while the citations were completed. "I was expecting busy." "Yeah," one of the students said. Another said something inaudible, to which the officer responded, "Fucking cold, yeah." The King Road residents were just up the hill from where they stood, maybe a few hundred yards away as the crow flies. It was nearly 3:30 a.m. by the time all three young men had been released, and the officers returned to their vehicle. They could see the students continue their drunken trek across the open field, toward wherever young men on college campuses walk after 3 in the morning. To the left of their path, the Sigma Chi house was well lit. There'd been some trouble there in the past, but none worse than at other houses on Greek Row. Way off in the distance, the three young men were just shadows now. The unmarked police vehicle, a hybrid sedan assigned to save on fuel prices, idled almost silently in the dark. Its headlights shone on the emptiness ahead. It was a weekend night, like so many others. Just up the hill from where the police officers sat, prosecutors now say, a then unknown subject, or unsub, in a white four-door Hyundai Elantra was beginning to circle 1122 King Road, contemplating his way inside the house. Do y'all want me to keep going? Or are y'all good for tonight? Y'all let me know. Let me know. Want me to keep going? Yeah, that is a trip. They were so close to the crime. So close. Yeah, oh, contemplating his way into the house. Yeah, exactly. Thank you. Thank you. I will keep going a little bit longer. Chapter 6. Security cameras and cell tower data. Security cameras and cell tower data told a story, but they didn't reveal who was behind the Elantra steering wheel or how events unfolded inside 1122 King Road. Less than 2 months later, police would identify and arrest a man they believed to have been their unsub. From the facts alleged in the affidavit supporting his arrest, an account of the early morning hours of November 13th emerges. The Elantra idled atop the concrete outside 1122 King Road. It was cold outside. See, it says right there, idled atop the concrete outside of 1122 King Road. It was cold outside, and engine exhaust would have been discharging in plumes. The street was often heavily trafficked during mid-evening hours, but began to quiet after 2 a.m. Bar closing time, and then 30 or 40 minutes of people getting home safely in Ubers and Lyfts or drunkenly hugging the shoulder of the road in their trucks. There were kitchen lights that stayed on while people grabbed late night snacks, then clicked off when they went to sleep. By 3:30 a.m., the neighborhood was reliably still. As seen on security video, the Elantra had already made 3 passes by the residents earlier that night, entering King Road at a snail's pace in the dark. It had turned around in the cramped corner near King and Queen each time, at the Queen Apartments overlooking 1122, before eventually making an awkward 3-point turn in order to exit the area. After the third pass and exit, the driver had reportedly taken Taylor Road away from Greek Row, maybe killing time. Finally, he turned and came back. In front of the house, the vehicle's unusually narrow taillights would have glowed like blood-red cat's eyes in the night. The driver wasn't leaving the area again, not just yet. He would have driven slowly up the incline past 1122, turned slightly at the Queen Apartments, and followed the asphalt 100 yards to the parking bluff that overlooked the home to the small cluster of woods. Kaylee Gonsalves' bedroom could be seen on the top floor of the residence, and on the floor beneath it was a sliding glass door that led inside. It was a few minutes after 4 a.m. by the time the unsub shut his vehicle off and stepped onto the pavement. In the past few months, the unsub cell phone had utilized the towers, serving 1122 King Road at least a dozen times, always in the late hours and the nights like this, his vehicle allegedly climbing slowly past the residence on each of those nights, then turning back around in the parking area of the Queen Apartment, preparing for his crime by surveilling the area law enforcement had suggested. He'd coached back down the hill in the darkness each time. The 3-story King Road house had just outside his driver's side window. As he passed, the body of his vehicle lowered to the ground. On the night of the murder, the unsub was dressed all in black, with a covering over his face from the bridge of his nose downward. In the dark, he crossed the concrete and then made his way through the brush toward 1122 King Road's unlocked sliding glass door on the second floor patio. Built against the hillside, the second floor of the residence was as easily accessible as the first, and even more inviting to outsiders with its open deck and overhead twinkle lights. The unsub opened the glass slider and stepped onto the kitchen. He would have crossed in the darkness and taken a small stairway that wrapped to the third floor, where 2 of the girls had been preparing for sleep. In the old house, according to a previous tenant, the threads and landing of the stairwell would have creaked, but just slightly. By the time the unsub was upstairs, the golden doodle, not much older than a puppy, began to bark. The audio was picked up by a neighboring camera. He barked through the bloodshed and through the sounds of the 2 girls, these best friends in junior high, struggling, but then eventually falling beside each other in the same bed. The gashes in their bodies made by a fixed blade hunting knife so long it could have a watermelon in one stroke, and so quick as to be impossible to successfully defend against. From downstairs, a female voice yelled up to be quiet. She was trying to sleep. She shouted up the winding hallway. Do you think maybe he thought, if this is true, that she yelled up like this, maybe he thought that that was Xana who was coming up the stairs? Maybe he heard Dylan say, "Shut the F up, I'm trying to sleep." And then that was Xana coming up the stairs, and that's when he chased her. Kaylee Gonsalves and Madison Mogan leaked blood onto their mattress, where they might have died almost immediately, and the Golden Doodle, shut into another bedroom across the hall, eventually quieted. The unsub went back downstairs, creaking toward the second floor landing. In a small hallway off the kitchen that led into the communal living room, where the King Road girls had filmed TikTok videos, sometimes drinking, often laughing. They were girls like the ones that other people had gone to prom with. Popular girls, wearing bright colors, smiling for the cameras, of their friends. The unsub would have met Ethan Chapin, 6 foot 4 inches tall, in the doorway of Xana's bedroom. The sharpened steel hunting blade in the unsub's right hand was an uneven match for one-time high school basketball player. Athletic as he was, who was likely slain near the doorway threshold and then shoved inside. The veins of his neck brutally severed. Xana Kernodle, tiny at 5'3" and approximately 112 pounds, put up a fight. Her arms took defensive wounds, but to the unsub, killing Xana was no more difficult than cutting through weeds along a foot trail, as easy as stepping forward. The time was approximately 4:20 a.m. when the unsub got back into the Elantra and sped away from King Road, leaving Moscow entirely. He drove the Elantra south, taking US 95 for a little over a half an hour into the darkness that Moscow's industrial environs dumped into. He passed the small community of Blaine in the remote Palouse farm country, so dark at night it looked like outer space stretching to either side of the headlights. There were gravel roads and ponds and creeks out there, but they were lost to the expanse. Through even more remote country, he traveled slowly, with no moon to see by. In time, he swung back north again through Washington State on US 195 toward Pullman's Washington State University campus. There was a heavy grade to the road and wide open slopes spanning from the shoulder, and overhead the sky was black as tar. There were homes, but they were sporadically placed amid the rolling farmland that in the summer would come alive, but just days ago had become brittle with frost. In the dark, his headlamps jostled over ruts in the road, the way lives are sometimes jostled by bumpy chance, and unforeseeably, on the bed beside Matty Mogan, he'd left the sheath of his knife. I'm going to stop right there. Whoa. What are y'all thinking? What are y'all thinking? Thank you so much, Sirius. Thank you so much for that. That's too kind. I like that. Gage is becoming one of my favorite narrators. I like that. Thank you. Thank you so much. Yes, you're going to have to wait till Thursday night because tomorrow night at 9 o'clock Central, I have an interview with an individual on another case. No more. No mas. No mas. We got to take our meds and hydrate. I do want y'all to ask me some questions, though. Well, thank you so much. Thank you for that. Thank you. That is too kind. That is too kind. So, y'all asked some questions. I know there was some inconsistencies in that reading. We all know there is. But like I said, the author was only pertinent to so much detail. One of the things that we do know now that he didn't put in the book was that they were all congregated at 2 a.m. in Kaylee's bedroom. And I guess he didn't put that in there because it's really irrelevant unless you knew what they were talking about. You know what I mean? Um, and also, you know, the part where he said Ethan would have met him in the hallway and he slashed him and then pushed him in the bedroom. I mean, that sounds feasible. It really does. I mean, all the conspiracies and all the thoughts about Ethan really make me wonder about that. You know what I mean? It just makes me wonder about Ethan and how he was really. Um, so Brian had to have passed Dylan's room on the way to Xana's. I think you meant Xana. You put Dylan's. Sirius Black, me too. I love audio. I have the whole collections. Okay. Love audio. I have the whole. Okay, so y'all asked me, y'all asked some questions, or y'all have some feedback. Um, and let me know what y'all thought about the writing. I thought the writing um was awesome. I thought it was pretty easy to read. It wasn't like some of the other books that I read on here. It was pretty simple. It was pretty easy to follow, and I think that was a good pick. I really, honestly, I started reading When the Night Comes Falling by Howard Blum or Bloom. I have read that book, and this one is written a lot a lot more simple to understand. You know what I mean? It's a lot easier to follow along. You're just not being lost by a lot of romanticizing, kind of drawn out wording. It just to the point. So, do y'all think that Mickey says she thinks that Ethan was in the bed? I mean that does make a lot of sense. It really does. Um, Makes a lot of sense actually, and it also makes sense that Dylan would have heard a lot of the commotion going upstairs and through the hallway right there. He would have heard a lot of that. The one thing I wasn't really pertinent to, that had no understanding of, what the Dana in her room supposedly that she could hear the slider, and people coming alongside the hill. I could understand that, but to be able to hear the slider, that would make sense that she would say somebody's here if that was her. If that makes any sense. But I'm gonna cut it short tonight, and I will probably read some more on Thursday night. I hope that you guys are back tomorrow night supporting the channel and asking Mr. Kahan some questions so that we can have him back to articulate his professionalism and his understanding of criminal activities. He did talk to this individual that we're going to be talking about, and he even had a letter that was written from him that we're probably going to read. So please show up and support the channel. That is 9 p.m. Central tomorrow night, and have some interesting questions for Mr. Kahan. And then Thursday night, we'll probably read some more around the same time, about 8:30, 8:45, and I'll read some more, okay? But thank y'all so much for being here tonight. I hope you enjoyed the audio reading. And y'all have a safe night and be safe out there. Maestro, cue that music.